Hello there, I'm Pearl Howie if you don't know me, and it's really nice to be able to speak to you again. It's as you can hear, my throat isn't great. I had laryngitis last week, and although I did a talk last week and I did a training at the beginning of this week, this is the first day I've really thought, yes, it's a good idea for me to talk. It's a good idea for me to sit and have a chat with you. And I've just been feeling very strongly that it's time to talk about something really sensitive, really emotional, which is money and fear of success. And I know this is a big issue for people at the moment because it's a big issue for me. And it kind of came up in the training this week. And also it keeps coming up to me in things like when I've not been well and I'm just sitting watching TV and watching a lot of adverts, particularly adverts from Nationwide about conversations about money. Kind of annoy me actually because sometimes they're about buying clearance things that you don't really need, and I'm thinking, well, it's not really very helpful. So I wanted to really tune in and talk about fear of success and money and some of the things that happen with money. And I just really want to start off by saying I don't know it all, because I'm studying fear of success, I'm teaching about fear of success, I train people to be fear of success instructors, and I'm still just getting started because it's such a big subject. And one of the reasons it's such a big subject is because this word success is something that we have a lot of conditions around, attachment to, and a lot of misunderstandings. And the way I use the word success is always authentic success, always doing the thing that is us, being more us. And I don't know if I've ever met anybody who said they don't want that. But what a lot of people think when they hear the word success is something that's probably a bit outdated now, which is a kind of an old view, an old paradigm of success, which is just about money, or about followers, or about fame. It can even be about health and fitness goals. And I'm going to touch on that as well. Because I find actually when we think about money, we're talking about money, sometimes a way that we can kind of look at that is also in terms of fitness. And one of the things that I know, maybe you know, no, I don't know, is that without our health, we really don't have anything. So you might hear, your health is your wealth, things like that. But it doesn't matter how much money you have if you are very seriously ill. Sometimes money is nothing in that situation. And one of the things I found, like with my coaches, the people who I've gravitated to and who've become my great teachers, I think there's none of them that have perfect health. Maybe one has a little bit, but they're not really my great teacher. And I've really learned from that, because in this sort of what I would call the life coaching sphere, there is often a lot of this idea, this concept that we are going to just manifest health and wealth, that we're just going to sit down and think about it and get a good vibration going, and it's all going to come to us. Well, I really don't believe that. And my teachers are wonderful because they also teach me differently. And they teach me differently because they go through big health issues. And when I talk about my spiritual teachers and these great teachers out there, I'm also talking about the teachers in my life, like my personal life, like my family, people who struggle with disability and illness. And I look at them, and sometimes we have this idea in terms of various teachers who say, we can heal anything and all this kind of stuff. And it's almost as if we're judging people for having ill health. And this came up for me very, very powerfully. I also study Indigenous healing, go around the world, all different types of healing practices. And I was in Sri Lanka, and I decided to go and see an Ayurvedic doctor. And when I went to see her, she said this thing. She said some very good things to say. In the end, I think pretty much everything I learned from her, I've let go now. It didn't work for me. But she said this thing, I was talking about my family members, and she said, when I was talking about their illnesses and how challenging I was finding it, and she said, well, we don't know what they did in a previous life. And at that point I thought, yeah, this is not my teacher. And that's okay. You know, I'm not trying to tell you who your teacher should be or what you should believe, but I will just say that's not my teacher or what I believe or what I teach. And personally, going through a lot of ill health the last couple of weeks and the last few years, you know, I know I don't believe that ill health is coming to me because I've got a negative mindset or something like that. I'm definitely learning and growing through those periods, episodes of ill health, and I'm learning a lot. I wouldn't wish it on anybody else though. Not fun. But similarly, when we talk about wealth and we talk about money, sometimes we can have this mindset, especially if we haven't actually had to deal with a great deal of lack, that somehow people who are poor have brought it on themselves. And we can have this very negative mindset, or we can buy into a lot of the stuff we see on social media and all things like that, that basically all we have to do to be wealthy is to just, you know, change our mindset. And I don't believe that either, okay? And I don't want to get too sidetracked yet. We'll get sidetracked a bit later on, but I want to just talk about some of the things that happen with our wealth and with our health, particularly with fear of success. And there can be many different things that are happening, okay? And what I love there are some really great financial teachers out there. And when I first started trying to work on money and my issues and things like that, a great teacher who was out there was one called Alvin Hall, you may have heard of. And he had a lot of TV programs a few decades ago, I think. And he really was a great teacher for that time. And he taught a lot about saving. He taught a lot about, you know, how we were spending ourselves out of having a good situation. And he did a lot of work with people who had, you know, you might call a spendaholic, you know, or shopping habits, things like that. And it was great, really, because a lot of what he looked at our behaviour and how we can throw money away, but also how we can equate money to love. And he really was looking, you know, and he's got some great books like Your Money or Your Life, things like that, which actually are really great if you want to dive in and you want to think about this relationship with money. And he was a great coach for that time. And then we had another coach who came in, who was on a lot of TV programs in the UK, who is Martin Lewis, who is to this day doing a great deal of work to help people who've got financial troubles. And what I love about Martin Lewis is his attitude, and where he's been so fantastic, is he's been looking into the structure of finance. So where things are broken in our systems, particular thing, PPI, which a lot of people had, where things were missold, and he's worked really hard to make sure that people got their money back from financial institutions. So although Alvin Hall was a great teacher, what he was really doing was looking at what we're doing in terms of money. Martin Lewis really looks at not just that, but also where we're being ripped off, and also how we can structure things in our own finances so that we're making the best of things. So for example, doing 0% balance transfers, things like that. And with a lot of the things that happened during the pandemic, he was standing up and saying very vocally, you know, this isn't right because these people are getting support and these people aren't. And he worked very, very hard for all of us who are self-employed to try and make sure that we got some support, if not the same support as people who had jobs in bigger companies and things like that. So he did so much work, and he is doing so much work in terms of our cost of living crisis at the moment, really, really working hard to call the government to account for what's going on, okay? And there's another great financial coach as well, who's Ken Honda. He's got a wonderful book called Happy Money, which is really an eye-opener if anybody has got any sort of hang-ups about money and things like that. So they're all really, really great teachers. And there can be a lot of different things that are going on in terms of finance and fear of success, okay? And the first thing I want to touch on, and really listen, if you listen and think, is this true for you? Because it's a lot like health and fitness, okay? We have different challenges, we have different times where things are going on for us. So sometimes it can be something where we're not looking after our own health. Sometimes it can be because things are coming in and causing us to have physical health problems or mental health problems. And sometimes, I always say everything happens for a reason. And sometimes that's true in our finances as well. And one of the things that has happened for me, probably my whole life, but I've been very aware of it the last couple of years, is that sometimes lack of money pushes me to do things that I wouldn't otherwise do. And so during the last couple of years, I got a job recording meditations for an app. And it turned out to be a very, very long job, lots of like stops and starts and things like that. And when I started, I said, right, I can do this. I can record a couple of minutes doing this with natural sound. I was okay. And then went on, it was like, no, excuse me, you need like studio sound. Okay. So then I went out and I looked at different post-production apps, and then I did a bit of work on my audiobooks, and then I ended up buying a microphone and learning how to use that and getting a little sound shield, and also learning how to post-produce what I was doing. So all the time I was moving on and getting better and better at recording. And what I did in the end is I've ended up recording lots and lots of audiobooks. And I was sitting down the other day and I finished off recording this 3-part audiobook, which is Camino de la Luna, Take What You Need, okay, which is an excellent book if you are thinking about money and you're thinking about lack, okay? And it's now available, it's 3 parts. And it took me years to record those 3 parts of the audiobook. And the last part I just did, and I'm in a new home, and the sound is so much easier here. And I understand the post-production so much better now. And I sat down to do this and it was just like whoosh, it happened so quickly. Because I'm now in a space where things are easy. Whereas all the time before, I had all these things going on and I was working to try to get through and to try to do these recordings, even these little 3-minute recordings. And when the sound was so bad where I was living, I had to do like 10 seconds and then stop, and then 10 seconds and then stop. And then, and it was like, oh. But I wouldn't have probably done my audiobooks if I didn't have this other job. I didn't have this other job where I was supposed to deliver something. If I didn't have these people who were pushing me to improve the quality of the sound recording. And so literally I was being pushed along because I'd committed to doing something for money. And when I sat down to do the audiobooks recently, I sat down, it was so easy. And I thought to myself, why wasn't it this easy to begin with? And not just talking about the sort of technical issues, but I had real blocks to using my voice. I had real blocks to recording and using my voice. And so I look at that situation, and what I can say is that lack, that need for money, was something that was being used by the universe in order to get me past my success blocks. So sometimes when we're sitting there and we need money and an opportunity presents itself to do something, what's really happening is that we're being pushed. We're being pushed to get past our success blocks. And this happened to me so many times when I was helping people to do their own publishing. Because what would happen was I would be working with them and they would ask me to do something, or how do you do this? Or, So I would do it for them. And when I was doing it, I'd be going, why haven't I done this for myself? Why haven't I published a book this way so that it is available to major booksellers? I know how to do it, or I can figure it out quickly if I'm working for somebody else and they're paying me. But I'm not doing that for myself, even though I want it, even though it's important to me, because I have those success blocks. And you could say the same about all the times I was teaching Zumba, all the times I was working, getting fitter, getting healthier, really being in the best shape of my life. I was doing it whilst I was working for other people because it was part of my job. Whereas I wouldn't have prioritized that for myself. So sometimes that lack of money is something that's happening. And it's really great to take a moment and think about, is this lack of money putting me in a situation where I have to confront and go through my success blocks? And I would say the same thing happens sometimes with a lack of health. Sometimes, say for example, we get stuck at home because we can't go out and do things, and it forces us to take care of things, to perhaps read that book that we've been trying to read and we haven't been able to find the time. And suddenly not having the health means, okay, you've literally got to figure out what you're going to do when you're not really up to going out and about and doing things. So that's something that can be really happening with money. The other thing that happens with money is sometimes we just throw it away. And one of the things we can do as a sort of fear of success practice, and this is one that probably works very, very well when if you're working through the practical trainings that I've created. When we set out and we decide, what is the next step that we want to take in terms of our success, of what we're trying to achieve. And the two big excuses I always hear, and I have used myself so many times, is I don't have the time and I don't have the money. And we use that even if we don't know how much something is. And many, many years ago, I said, right, do you know what? I'm not going to do that to myself anymore. I'm not going to use these two obvious sort of habits, Anytime something comes up, I say, I don't have the time, I don't have the money. That's not to say I'm always going to have the time or the money, but I'm not going to just say that before I really check. I check, do I have the money? Do I have the time? And sometimes what happens is we're almost tested, when we set out to do something and the money isn't there. And I remember this very powerfully from when I went to Sedona. Now, what I did is I actually decided I wanted to learn from Don Miguel Ruiz. The day that I decided that, I looked online and there was a training coming up in, I think it was April 2016. And what I did is I put it in installments on a credit card. I even had to switch the credit card like halfway through those installments because I didn't have enough money. And I would never recommend that anybody do that now. But it's how I got to where I was. It's how I got to do that awakening, do the retreat, all those things. And as it was coming up, I was going to Sedona in the States. And so what I had to do is I had to have a certain amount of money in my bank account before I left. Because if I didn't, the mortgage wouldn't get paid, all those things. So I remember I had a cash flow, and for months before I went, being self-employed, teaching classes, I never knew how much money I was going to make. And I didn't know if other things would come in and take that money out. So I had, my long cash flow, and at the bottom was, the amount of money I was planning, I predicted I would have in my account when I left to go on this retreat. And one of the things that happened at that time was things were constantly changing. So classes would get cancelled, and then I would make a bit more somewhere else, and extra expenses would come in, something else would go out. And this figure at the bottom my target figure for when I was, if I don't reach this target, I can't go on this trip, was always the same. No matter how much money came in, how much things changed, every time that figure at the bottom stayed the same. And it was one of those lessons in life where I thought, you know what, I'm meant to do this. And the money will come, the money will show up to do this. And it really taught me a lot. And there are other times I really wanted to do something, a training, money's not there. It's not the time. It's not the time for me. And that happened to me later that same year. I wanted to go to Mexico and to do a training in Teotihuacan. And these trainings kept coming up with Don Jose Ruiz, who I had really connected with at the first retreat. And I thought, this is my teacher. I really need to go and do a training with him. And every time it came out, there's a training, I was like, can't do it. I haven't got anything, can't go. Another one, I haven't got the money, can't go. And then I decided to sell my house and go traveling. And then another retreat came up, and it was amazing because it was not just Don Jose, it was also Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. And it was New Year, and it was like the perfect timing, it was everything. And I was like, wow. But these retreats sell out really, really quickly because they're so, even just the regular ones sell out real quickly. So 3 people, I was like, oh. I didn't have the money. And I was emailing them, I was saying, can you hold me a place until I sell my house? No. Can I do some work for you and, get discounted, or can I, anything I could do I really got to do this retreat. I've got to do this. No, don't worry, if it's meant to be, it'll happen. And it did. And luckily it didn't sell out before I sold my house and before I got the energy to make that booking. And I went and I did it, and it was amazing, something I really had to do. So sometimes that lack is also holding us back from doing something before we're ready, which is very different to when we're saying, I don't have the money, and we're holding ourselves back. We're sort of, you could call it a self-sabotage, when we're holding ourselves back from doing what we need to do in order to move forward. And earlier this year, I wanted to do a training, and so I booked the space, even though I really didn't have a lot of money, and I didn't know where that money was going to come from, and it showed up. And I booked my insurance, I did all the things I needed to do because I had the faith that it was all going to come together, it was going to work out, and it did. So I'm very lucky in that respect, but also it comes from a place of not holding myself back and having faith that the money will show up. So those are 2 of the things that can be happening for us. But I want to just talk, I'm not going to try and cover everything about money and this fear of success, but one of the things that is really important to know is, when I talk about this audiobook, this book, Camino de la Luna, Take What You Need, when I was traveling and I was doing the Camino de Santiago, I learned very quickly that I needed to let go of things. So I thought I was traveling light, but I needed to travel lighter. So I had to really question everything that I was carrying. And I had already really done that when I was very broke, looking at anything I was paying out for and querying every penny that was going out. And I feel like I'm in a similar situation now, like a lot of people have had to be over the last few years. And I think that's a very important time. It is almost a spiritual thing to look at everything that's going out and really thinking about it, really examining, do I need this? And do I want to let go of this? Do I need the TV subscriptions? Do I need this insurance? Do I need the car? All kinds of things like that. And sometimes when what we could call maybe downsize, we actually end up in a better position. So for example, I've just moved house, and one of the reasons is I needed to pay less rent. So I've actually moved to a lovely flat exactly where I want to be living, perfect place. But I wouldn't have done that if I didn't need to reduce my rent. So sometimes we get more, we get better for less. Similarly, I also moved to the place where I have my office postbox, my business postbox. It was too much money and it kept going up and up and up. And I just thought, no, I'm not happy paying this. Looked around, I found another place, and I moved my postbox. I moved house again, and within a week of being in that new space, I was invited to an event there. Went along, gave me free lunch. I met really interesting people, made more contacts. I thought, you know what? In all the years of being at this other place, that wasn't happening. I didn't get any perks. You know, the price kept going up and I wasn't getting anything extra for that. Suddenly, I'm in a space where they're like friendly to me. They invite me to stuff. I'm learning things. I'm making connections. So I'm getting a lot more for my money, like a lot more. I better go and find out where my post is, but I don't worry about that too much. So sometimes when we experience this lack, it actually pushes us for better. And it was actually Rumi, who's a great spiritual teacher, who always said you should fall in love with your lack. Because sometimes it's that lack that pushes us out. Very much like what I was talking about, that fear of success is kind of countered by our need. So we have a lack, we need something, it pushes us through those blocks, that reticence we might have to do something, even if it's talking about what we do, even if it's selling. And I've noticed this as well with a lot of people. We struggle with saying what it is we do and how you can buy stuff that we've done and, you know, or give us money and this kind of thing. So let me break that now for myself. And I was doing a branding exercise recently on a training. It was a free training somebody offered me. And we were talking about brands, and they said, you know, what kind of brand do you want to be? You know, which brands do you resonate with? And it popped into my head that I want to be like Greggs, which, if you're not in the UK, it's a high street baker, and they sell lots of donuts and sausage rolls and pasties and things like that. I really hope people in America know what a pasty and a sausage roll is. But they also started doing vegan sausage rolls a few years ago, and they got a lot of flack from some people about that. But what happened was their share price shot up because they were putting vegan sausage rolls out there, and they were selling like hotcakes. And one of the things they've done through this cost of living crisis is really try and keep their costs, their prices low. And I went in there the other day and they did me a vegan hot chocolate. I was so excited. And I had a vegan sausage sandwich and a vegan, it's great. And in a lot of places, you lose out being vegan because, you know, the pricing is high. And their stuff was really cheap. And it's like, it's vegan. I was like, yes. And it was tasty, really, really tasty. And I thought, this is who I connect with at the moment. People who are offering really good stuff at low prices. And they're doing really well during the cost of living crisis because they've got cheap stuff. And I was thinking about this and I thought, you know what? I've got cheap stuff too. And what I have is I have books. And my Fear of Success book, you know, Pearl Escape's Fear of Success. Somebody was saying this the other day on a training, a talk I was doing, and they said, you need to go and buy Pearl's book because it's really, really cheap. And I don't know how it is, but it's about £1.77 on Amazon. It's about $2.99 in the US. It's really cheap. It's really cheap. And that's great because so many trainings and things that you want to do out there are expensive. Even my trainings, because they're live, you know, I gotta work it out, really. I'm still working that out. But the books, really, really cheap. You can go and buy those right away. Just like you would go and buy a vegan sausage roll. And you don't have to stress about it, even if you don't have very much money, which I love. But these are the things that happen with fear of success, with money. And money isn't the big, you know, it's a lot of my spiritual teachers never talk about money. And there are reasons for that. Because we get sidetracked, we get caught up in it. It's like a trap sometimes. And it's really important that we don't get sidetracked by money. Because we said health is more important. And really our peace of mind, the things that we're striving for are not necessarily about money. And in fact, most of us, it's not the most important thing in our lives. But one of the things that is really important in terms of truth. So I say success is about being truthful with ourselves and with other people. And doing what is true for us. Our authentic success is being truthful and authentic. And one of the things that we can do about money right now, and I think this is so important, is we can tell the truth. One of the great things that happens when we tell the truth sometimes is that we have to ask for help, which is one of the greatest solutions to fear of success, is to actually ask for help. Sometimes in terms of success, we think it's about showing up in a way of being very confident, faking it till we make it. But sometimes the most powerful and bravest thing we can do is to ask for help. And when I moved house, I had to ask for a lot of help from different people. And they came through for me. And what that meant is a different relationship, an improved relationship. So in having to ask for help, it actually healed a lot of the relationships in my life that were not doing so great. So that lack really served me in a different way. But it wasn't just about asking for help, it was about being truthful. It was about not being ashamed to admit that I needed help. And that's one of the most important things when we're trying to get over our fear of success. Because I don't think any of us can really achieve authentic success without help. If you read the book or listen to the book, Camino de la Luna, Take What You Need, you'll see time and time again, it's about asking for help. In that situation, in that book, it wasn't about financial help because I had the cash. But what it was often was not having any food. There were no cafes, no restaurants around, nothing open. Somebody offering me dinner, or a ride, or a bed for the night, or taking care of me. Just helping me to find what I needed for the next step. But coming back to that concept of truth, or is it a concept? Truth is truth, right? And one of the things that's really important when we are up against it, whether it's health, whether it's wealth, whatever it is, or relationships, is the truth. And as I've talked about before, I'm really struggling with migraines at the moment. And it forces me to do more and more research. And the field of migraine has changed a lot in the last few years, where people have understood what it is all about. It's a neurological condition. So a lot of the thinking behind migraine has changed with the research. And the more research I do, the more I realize what's true and what's not. So for example, there was a lot of talk before about trigger foods. If you eat this, you'll get a migraine. But the research has now shown that there are very few actual trigger foods. More often than not, we eat certain foods because an attack is coming on. So we might be more prone to eating certain things just because we're starting to feel unwell. And it's not something that's really going to trigger. In fact, it might help us to actually get through a migraine. But it's about the truth. It's not about what we think about it. And as we do the research, what happens is things get easier because we uncover what's true for us. And also the research, it keeps uncovering new truths, or what was true always, but we got it wrong. We got confused between cause and effect, so I'm doing this and then this happens. No, this is already happening. The seeds of that migraine are already there. It's like a volcano or an earthquake. It's already happening. The tremors are already being felt. It's just that, those in this run up, we're more likely to do certain things. And when we talk about finance and really looking at these conversations I see on TV and I see these things like that, I would say Martin Lewis is a great voice at the moment. If you have any particular questions about finance, go and have a look there, especially if you're in the UK. But we could ask, really, when we're having these conversations, why are we having such a difficult time? What is going on? And if we look deeply and we look more truthfully, what we see is anyone who is paying an electricity bill is paying way too much money because we have a faulty equation at the root of the pricing of our electricity. And you don't have to take my word for it, because this is what Martin Lewis has talked about. This is what Octopus, the big provider, is talking about. We have this crisis not because of any reality, but because the price of our electricity is based on a faulty equation, which is based on the price of gas. And there is no reason for that. Or rather, there may have been a reason before. It may have been a good idea to use this equation in the past, but it's not working for us now. And just the same way, we may have had an understanding and a way of doing things before, but now it does not serve us. It does not work for us. In fact, it's actually causing poverty throughout society. And when we look at finance and we look at poverty, one of the things we can say is that a lot of it is not about our own success wounds or our own money wounds or anything like that. There is a huge element of the problems that we're facing that are about social problems, are about things being structured falsely. And we could say, why is this so important? Well, because if we don't understand that, then we judge ourselves. And we try and fix a problem that needs to possibly be fixed at a different level. So, for example, you can hear my voice, I've got a bit of a cold and this kind of thing. One of the things that happens for me is that I react very strongly to pollution. So I know that I have to take myself away from pollution in order to be healthy and fit. I deliberately avoid areas of high pollution. If I'm staying in London, I often go quite to the outskirts of London in order to sleep, so that I'm not sleeping in a really toxic area. So there's two things. One is my response to that pollution, and the second thing is that pollution in the first place. And a lot of people don't have that choice. A lot of people, say children, may be living in an area with a very high pollution. And so on that level, we need to look on a social level at solving issues that cause poverty. So for example, why we don't pay people in certain roles and certain jobs what they really deserve to be paid, when we know how important the work that they do is. And we've seen through the last few years, who are the essential workers. We do know who those essential workers are, because they were the people who were working during the pandemic, during lockdown. They were the people who were filling the shelves, keeping the trains running, keeping the buses running, people keeping the NHS running, the cleaners. Absolutely essential frontline workers, carers. people who had to keep on going regardless. They were not the football players, and the football players know this. But we've kind of forgotten that. It seems, you know, we have this thing where we really rely on people. We take everything they've got to give, and then we don't reward them. We don't look after them. And we need to change that on a societal level as well. We can't just fix our own personal issues. We need to fix things on a social level. In the same way that if we want good health, we have to look after the air. We have to take care of all the things that we need, like having nutritious food, having clean water, things that we don't necessarily always take, things that we do often take for granted. Anyway, I hope this helps. And I hope, you know, one of the things in life coaching that we see, and, you know, this thing of I want this, I need to go after that. If we're not careful and we put too much onus on ourselves, we create a situation where we're not looking after teachers, we're not looking after nurses, we're not looking after people in our society who are absolutely essential. And then for anybody who has that desire to be a nurse, if that's their calling, if we don't take care of them financially or give them the possibility of having a prosperous life, what we're really saying to people is that you have to do something different in order to live. In order to be able to live in society, you need to do something different. And we're stopping people from following their calling. We're stopping people from living their authentic success. And I don't believe in that. Because I do believe that when people have a calling to do something as important as being a nurse, being a teacher, being a cleaner even, or going and working in a supermarket, we need to make sure that they're taken care of because they are essential to all of us. I'm going to stop talking before my voice goes completely. And I really wish you all the best. I wish for all of us that we have enough. That we have enough to live our lives without penny pinching, without having to not take care of ourselves, without having a lack of choice and a lack of options. So I hope for all of us, that we have enough to really enjoy life. Lots of love. See you soon. Bye-bye.